Welcome everybody to the first episode of 2023. It's been a bit of a delay, but it's been a busy start to the year. I hope all my listeners are well. And as you all know, I'm delighted to welcome the wonderful and lovely Ketna to the show. And Ketna and I go back a few years in the world of social media, etc., etc. And she is just not going to spoil her story, but she's just branched out to do her own thing. Welcome to the dark side or the light side. I don't know the thought, as it were. But as always, the title is Employee Advocacy or Corporate Spam, or Corporate Vomit, as sometimes I refer it to, but didn't really want that in the actual printed title. Anyway, I'll stop waffling. Ketna, as always, who, what, why, when, where, and let's see what rabbit hole we go down on this one.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so I basically stepped out of my corporate career. It's been about 17 years now, and I've now, like you say, branched out into potentially the dark side. It's been an exciting journey. So I'm only 1 month in, but I am actually looking to set up my own training company to help companies to evolve their social media offering, because you and I both know that not all companies are doing it that well. So it's about helping them evolve that space, because getting them to understand tools like employee advocacy, like Sales Navigator potentially, and also the other tools that get less spoken about within this space, because that's effectively, there's so much more to social media than just the marcom side of what it is, and it's using social media as a business tool as opposed to marketing. So that's basically how I'm going to be stepping out into the deep dark world of entrepreneurship.
And I said, I know my brain's already going, as it always does, because my audience know these are never scripted. We never prepare them,
Yeah, no.
Which is a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. But it's we and I have been in the game more or less the same amount of time. So if we take a step back in time, a quick potted history of how have you seen kind of social media from a B2B perspective kind of evolve over the last 10 years? And I think maybe we can touch on the acceleration that's happened, through because of the pandemic. But where has it been, and where are we today, and where do we think it could or maybe should go?
I think that when you're looking at B2B and B2C social media or marketing, it's not necessarily looking into it's B2B, so therefore it has to be done this way. It's B2C, so it has to be done that way. It's looking at, how am I going to be engaging with my customer? And if you've put your customer in at the forefront of everything that you're talking to them about, that's the space that you want them to explore. And I feel like often marketers get so caught up in that space of, let me talk to them in the way that traditionally B2B marketing has always been done. And we don't want them to do that, because how are you going to step it? We've all heard about the noise in terms of what's being said and done out there. And I think Gartner or Edelman, one of them, actually came up with a stat that said 71% of decision makers found that over half of content, B2B content, was ineffective. It was invaluable. The thought leadership that was being put out there, it's just contributing to the noise. And we do see a lot of noise out there. And unfortunately, that's a space, and that's how, if you look at LinkedIn, for example, that's where B2B marketers have often gone to. They are using it, but not using it effectively. The content is stale. It's PDF, so it's reports, it's research, but they're not looking at, how do I bring this content? How do I make it B2C? And how do I make this pop out? How do I influence someone within the first 3 seconds? How do I get to captivate their attention to draw them in? Because this might actually be interesting. So I think the evolution of content, whilst I don't think it's quite there, is taking place. I mentioned to you earlier, but I was in a presentation last week where somebody talked about influencers for the first time. I've never heard that being talked about at any corporate event when it came to B2B marketing. So if you're talking about influencers now, that's a fantastic step forward. But I still think that there's so much, there's a long way to go.
So I'm not going to go down the influencer route yet. We will do. So
Yes.
I want to reflect on the comments you made around kind of the noise and the content, and I'm going to pose, because I agree with you, and it's frustrating when I work with clients and you see the 15 repetitions of the front page of a report and no reason as to why anybody should read it. And when you see it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times at the same time in your feed, it just becomes noise. So to be clear, what I'm picking on that element piece, what we're not saying is that we shouldn't be doing thought leadership or PDFs or long form content. What we are saying, though, is we need to think about creating better hooks and top of funnel, if you will, or reason as to why should I pause, spend a bit of time on this, and then potentially look to download the whole paper and read a 3,000, 5,000, 1,000 word piece, or listen to a half an hour podcast on some really dull regulatory change that's happened. So that's what we're saying. Yes, it's not necessarily the body of content itself, but yes, we agree. The content has to be engaging and interesting for the reader, long form or short form. It is that initial hook to cut through the noise. So
Absolutely. And also, you know, I know we're going to be talking about employee advocacy, but your employee advocacy is only as good as the content. The tool is only as good as the content. And if the content isn't that great, then of course the advocates are only taking what is being provided to them.
Yeah.
So in that respect, you're really sort of looking at the content itself. And I don't know, this conversation could almost become a content subject, but let's look at this content. If we were to dissect it, are B2B marketers or comms doing its justice for what they should be doing to be able to take quite a serious topic and turn it into an impactful way to cut through the noise, because they do need to cut through the noise because there's a lot of noise out there.
Okay, so let's pause there. I like your turn of phrase there, doing this content justice, because I had this conversation the other day with a law firm where they were talking about, well, what do we post? And I went to their website and said, well, look at all these podcasts, look at all these videos. I'm assuming you paid someone quite a lot of money to produce and create those, and they're just sitting there fallow on a website, hoping that someone might find it and hoping that someone might listen to it. And these are partners, right? And they all shuffle and look at their feet and go, oh, okay, I understand. But let's park that. I like the doing the content justice. Is this then a leadership question? Because I'm hearing in my head, and we've both been on that side of the table. I haven't got time. I haven't got the resource to actually do what needs to be done to give justice to this content. I may even have the creativity to do what I want to do, but it's time, money, or dare I say, permission that they can do that? And part of that question reflects on what you were saying earlier, is that this is marketing. Whereas 10, for those that are listening, a big smile has just appeared. For those, and 10 years ago, 15 years ago, yes, social media, I guess, was or is marketing. I'm going to pause there because I don't want to be leading in terms of the conversation. I think I know where we're going to go, but I'll let you. I'll let you reflect.
I think I alluded to it earlier, is that it's a business tool, and it should be used as social media should be used as a business tool. And if it is, then it will be given the gravitas that it probably needs to do that. But going back to your earlier point where you said, do we need the permission? I often feel that companies that you work in law, that I've worked in finance, is highly regulated,
Yep.
they are very afraid to really push the needle. They don't want to almost draw attention to what they're doing. I do find that that's often a matter that they are grappling with, is that we want people to know, but we don't want to draw too much attention to it, because that's getting outside of our comfort zone, or they're somewhat afraid to do that. And that's the sort of, and the marketers and the comms and social media, they're all sort of trying to balance themselves on that tightrope of what do we do? How do we get there? And that's why you're getting, dare I say it, crap content. So and that's the space that we're currently dealing with, and it takes a few brave marketers and a brave comms people to really to convince the companies that this is what we should be doing. They've got to have incredible influential skills to be able to bring that senior leadership along with them, because that's not their wheelhouse.
Yeah. And that so I'm reflecting on a post, I think it was Barney from Alex Partners posted a couple of weeks ago. I think it was on the drum or raconteur, and it was around a couple of marketers had been interviewed, and around the trust piece that if you're a CEO or CEO, you know, at least as a CEO, managing partner, whomever, you have hired a CMO to do a job, therefore trust them to do a job. And if they come with something that's a little bit rogue or a little bit, but we didn't do that, we've never done that before, well, there's a reason, and now is the time to try something a little bit different, which is, I guess, comes. And this is a tricky one, right? Because now we're going to come back to the employee advocacy stuff, and for sure. But I think this is really important to kind of at least touch on, because if there isn't that trust there, I feel that one will never be able to break out of that echo chamber that we're just doing that. We're all in the sea of sameness. And you may not have an answer to this, but have you experienced or seen, or can give any points as to how within the world of kind of marketing, let's put it under that topic for the moment, you can start to build that trust with leadership, that I know what I'm doing, and we're not going to be on the front page of the FT or the Daily Mail for all the wrong reasons for a campaign that's going to go viral. However, I do remember way back when I used to work with Foxtons in a previous life, and they always said all publicity is good publicity.
Well, yeah, there is that, but often what I've found, and this is me kind of going rogue, and I do this often, but I go under the radar, and where you're seeking forgiveness and not permission, whereas you're going out and suggesting to them, let's do a pilot. At least let's try a pilot. Let's try this. Let's dip our toes in the water. And at that point, you really sort of, you're just easing them into it. If you're not easing them into it, then it's going to come as a big shock.
Yeah.
And so that has always been a tactic of mine, and I feel like it has worked. And sometimes you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
It's going along with the game and playing that to expect that. But yeah, I do find that there's never going to be a right or wrong answer either, because everyone depends on how good you are at influencing your stakeholders and how much space you even have at that table, and who's overpowering your voice as well. Because if you've got somebody else who is adamant that this is going against you, you're not going to be able to get that voice across. And I do find that many people, they don't want to rock the boat, so they just won't do it. And so you won't necessarily have advocates for you.
And just reflecting on, you know, conversations I've been privy to, where there are people who aren't even marketing experts or social media experts, but they are senior and they think they know.
Yeah.
They think
they know everything. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So okay, and so I guess it's for the listeners that, you know, we're all in the same boat. We feel it.
Yeah.
But I think now is the time to try and be brave, maybe go under the radar, or find somebody who, you know, a willing senior voice who's happy to kind of give you that air cover if it is it is needed. So if we then step back,
just to add to that, one other thing is sometimes speaking in their language.
okay.
Because often marketers speak or comms speak in their language. They're trying to influence talking in their jargon. And you've almost got to work in the leadership's jargon, and you have to get them to understand it in their terms. So just I'll leave it at that.
Don't talk about impressions or click-throughs or
Yes.
UTM links or all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So back to, well, not back to, but kind of continuing down that that lane. If we kind of go on the, because it is all interlinked, kind of employee advocacy seems to be coming full circle again.
Yes.
in the 15 or so years that I've been on the receiving end of it, and the last however long I've been consulting, kind of not to it, but it's been always part of the conversation around social selling. Is social selling employee advocacy, or is it not? And I think they are. That fundamentally the mechanics are the same, they're complementary, but the outcomes are slightly different. You know, this is going to sound like a really stupid question, but let's just go over what is employee advocacy.
And I'm glad you asked me that, because I think you always have to start with the definition and if you Google it, they're pretty much going to say something along the lines of sharing content to promote the organization using their employees via social platforms. But I find that the most effective part, and you just touched on it, is that the effective part is where the tool actually enters into the realm of social selling. And that doesn't often get much airtime. So where your employees are sharing content in order to educate and influence the services that the brand has to offer, the service then becomes primary, and then the brand becomes secondary.
Okay.
This in turn offers sort of support to the employees' day-to-day jobs, because it has multiple roles that I think employee advocacy serves many goals, and it's multidimensional in that respect.
So I'm glad that we're on the same boat around kind of it can and is kind of social selling and those outcomes that you want to achieve. But then you also, and again, you know, I guess you and I, coming from it, we've worked for large organizations that are complex, multidisciplinary, multiple service lines, and you have said that, and I agree with you, that it is a multi-dimensional tool, which in itself, I believe, then presents a risk in terms of, well, what if we think about that the employee is the person that is pushing the content? Is there a risk where the employee themselves, I'm going to make this up, let's say you advise on tax, or you're a real estate person and you advise on I don't know, sheds up in the north. And by sheds, I mean industrial units. That's what they call them, real estate.
Yes.
Sheds. It's the big warehouses, it's the big fulfillment centers, but it's known as sheds. So I've always had the view that they kind of need to stay in their lane from a content and distribution dispersion perspective. That this is what I do, versus going into you need to push everything that we're asking you to push as an organization. So how does one balance that or educate the person that it's as much about them, it is as much about them as it is the company?
Yeah, and it is an education process. But just to sort of start off on this, is that there's often a question about should they do it or should they not do it? And to address that part is that people connect with people. They don't connect with brands, because when you have a faceless brand, you're not necessarily connecting as much. Yes, you know of the brand and you might actually like the brand, but at that point, that relationship is where it ends. Your employees are the people who are going out there, the agents themselves, going out there, they're representing your brand. They are speaking to your clients, they're speaking to your stakeholders on a day-to-day basis. So why would they not be empowered enough to be able to share that content?
Agreed. So there's the permission piece, I guess, or the empowerment piece, to your point, that you can you can do this.
Yeah.
So why do we not?
Control. Often.
Okay.
That's a terrible thing to say. I do find that it goes back to that earlier point that we were talking about when regarding content is, and because I've had my own sort of blockers on this when it came to me rolling out an employee advocacy program,
Mhm.
and the teams were scared. And it wasn't until I argued my case, and similar to what I just said to you, it's like they are trusted to go out there and represent the business on a day-to-day basis. Why are you not putting them up on screen? And they they generally don't really have much of an answer for that. And they're just worried about, well, oh, they're going to push something out. And what you're going to find is that employees are self-selective about the content that they want to share. They
Mhm.
don't want to be affiliated with rubbish content. They won't blindly necessarily share content. So some of them, most of them, in fact, I'd say that are afraid to share content. I often used to get the question, "Can I share this?" And I said, if
Mhm.
it's on the website and it's public information, of course you can. And it's just you asking yourself the question, is this relevant to my audience, to my network at that point? And so I think we don't give our employees as much credit as they deserve.
Interesting. So the control piece is management fearful that we're out of control if,
Yeah,
oh my God, someone's going to go viral. Da, 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 da.
yeah.
Okay, let's accept stuff goes wrong. It happens. Sometimes
Yes,
mistakes are made. So
yeah.
then that's the permission piece and empowerment piece. But then we take it a
Mm,
layer down to the employee. I'm going to stick at the moment with revenue creation roles. This could be a surveyor, it could be a lawyer, it could be an accountant, it could be an out and out salesperson. But of course, we have other
mm,
other employees. So then it's the okay. Now I know I'm allowed to do this, and
yeah.
there is content out there to use, either corporate content or yes, you can go and repurpose an interesting article from the States Gazette or the Lawyer or the FT or Harvard Business Review or what have
Yeah.
you. Why do we still then come up against this? That just people just not doing it, even if we've argued, debated, shared with them the rationale and the reason that it can help them as individuals.
Do you mean against the employees or the people
No,
who
I
are
so
blocking
let's
it?
let's assume that we have leadership that said that yes, you're
Yeah.
empowered, you can do it. Let's
Okay.
let's assume in a perfect world that there's really great content for employees to choose to push out, even if it's just
Mm,
the corporate content. Why do we then still see, if we accept the stats, LinkedIn's now, let's stick with LinkedIn, but fundamentally it's
yeah.
only a social media platform, but LinkedIn's now 900 million members around the on the platform. Yet I
Yeah.
think stats are roughly still, it's only like 1% of members
Yeah.
still actually publish content. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad content, it's just they publish
It's
posts
content.
on LinkedIn. Yet we are in an age of social media, and it is surrounding us. So why in 2023, assuming that all those mechanisms are in place, do we
Yeah.
feel that employees just still don't do it?
No, thanks for the clarification. Um, I think the challenges are that it's a cultural and behavioral shift,
Okay.
and nobody likes change. Nobody wants the extra work. And you've got these competing priorities as a result. And I'll just give you a scenario because these employees are not content creators. They don't wake up in the morning and think, I must share this piece of content before I have watered, fed my children, and got my children to school, and every other priority on their list before they get out the door. They're not wired that way. This has to be about a convenience for them. And
Mm-hmm.
often tools are not necessarily convenient. The tools that I've worked with Disseminate, for example, were very convenient because they prompt the employee
Mm-hmm.
to do so. Some tools don't do that, um, and so they don't go looking. So effectively, yes, the employee doesn't go looking for it, and they're not going to receive. They want to receive that relevant information as a result. So
Mhm.
you and I both know when you work in large companies, they work in silos.
Yeah.
It's just the crux of it. And employee advocacy helps solve the ability to bring company news to the forefront and to their attention, where websites and websites and intranets are largely ineffective to do that because they're not going to spend their time looking for that content. So that they gather EA tools will gather that information, prompt your employees with that information to push it out there. Now, the second challenge in terms of employing, like getting employees, sorry, to do that and adopting the tool, is that it's more effort. Sometimes it can be more effort than it's worth for them. So it is getting them to get into the rhythm of understanding why this tool is going to benefit them. And that's like that comes as part of a behavioral shift. That doesn't come overnight. It's going to take time. But when they see their peers doing it, or if they see that their competitors are also doing that, they are influencing via the content they're putting out there, they get competitive. They're like, well, I want to do that as a result. But it's going to take time. It's a big cultural shift. And we've spoken about this before, where you don't necessarily it's going to take time to adopt. It's moving the Titanic
Mhm.
as a result. It's not going to happen overnight. And so often these processes, when you're having these introducing employee advocacy, whether with a tool or without, it has to be a seamless process. It cannot be, it has to be frictionless as a result.
Mhm.
And the tool is the way to do that and in order to for it to gather the content, lay the content out in a non-confusing way, and then be able to craft a message for you to be able to publish. And often I find that there's so many companies that do not know that there are tools out there that can do that.
Okay, including the message crafting, even including the message crafting bit as well.
Yeah,
Those are unique messages because
exactly.
the umbrage I have with EA tools
Hmm.
is that in itself actually creates the corporate spam because you got the
Yeah,
employees just going if they're willing to do it, but it's just like post, and then it's all this. You're back to kind of square one of just the sea of sameness. And even though we
yeah,
encourage them, no, add your own your own spin to it and add your own your piece to it, which is why I'm not entirely sure why LinkedIn have added the repost button. To be honest, I'm not
yes.
really see the value in there. Anyway, we digress. So if I'm hearing correctly, there are tools out there which can help you craft
Yeah,
a unique message. And I was promised I wouldn't say it, but I'm going to have to because of the Microsoft announcements. And I guess with ChatGPT, this has
yeah,
become more of a
yeah.
standard, I guess, over the next 5 years or so.
And that's the evolution of how this is going to play out. But there are tools that allow you to sort of craft multiple messages so that your message doesn't look exactly the same.
Okay.
Yes, you can add your own spin. And I always encourage anyone who I'm training to personalize it, put it in your language if you can, put it in a way that it sounds like your tone, your style, as opposed to just copying what is out there. Sometimes they need that for as training wheels. They're a bit nervous about putting out their first post or first few posts, and that's fine. But that's the space that they're in at the minute. It's just that they are dipping their toes in the water, and sometimes they do they will end up eventually reposting the same stuff.
So to that point then, and we've just focused on, pushing
Mm,
corporate content at
yeah.
the moment. Does employee advocacy then include or should include, leading questions, shouldn't ask those, the fact that employees are also allowed to have their own personality and brand on social that kind of steps outside of the corporate machine?
Did you see the tweet that went out from the cap? There's a pilot from BA. It happened on a couple of days ago now. He was asked not to tweet out. He's got 100,000 followers and was asked not to tweet pictures of sunsets and pictures with celebrities that come into the cockpit. And he's got a fantastic following. And he's been asked by BA not to be able to publish that, not to put out that content. Now people are in uproar he's had 2 million views off the back of it, and
Right.
and his comments are flooded. And the conversation continues on LinkedIn, Twitter, and everywhere else. So I think that that is a prime example of why should he not have his own personality.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's working for the brand. He's clearly advocating for the brand, and they love
Yep.
him for it. But why would you not want your own personality? And I get in certain industries like the ones that you and I have worked in, you won't want that. But why would you not have that that personality? Everyone has a personality. It's almost like, well, you have to have the same haircut. Every employee must have the same haircut, or they have to wear a uniform to come into work. You'll have outroar.
I guess what it comes back to then is and I guess we got to be clear here in terms of the personality piece, and this is what I guess the shift that happened over COVID, especially in our world of professional
Yeah,
services, was insane. You saw people putting stuff on there that they would never normally do. And I'm not talking outrageous stuff. Again, it was a lawyer
yeah,
from a law firm who's remained nameless. And he said, I was doing a Zoom court hearing, and he basically had a shirt and tie on here, shorts underneath, and he basically went viral by law firm terms. And I think like I said, I guarantee you've got more views and impressions on that single post than your marketing team has ever been able to achieve ever in the history of marketing. And then I said, has it actually generated any conversations and connections? He went, yes, actually, it has created some new connections with council as well. So I think let's be clear here. This isn't, and again, it's this split though. We're not saying go all Facebooky, but there has been a shift in terms of the type of content that we now see on platforms like LinkedIn that you wouldn't have seen 10 years ago, would never even considered, and to where we are today. And it's that, for me, it's that, yes, share your personality, but in a way that you'd be comfortable doing on stage at a conference, or
exactly.
in
Or
a
a networking event.
professional
Yeah,
manner, or in a conversation you'd have with a client that you know really well about kind of what you do outside
yeah,
of the day job, which we all do. But then that comes full circle back to your BA example of kind of the corporate freaking out that how does that reflect the brand of the brand? And if we're sensible about it, it's awesome. It's like, I really want to work in a company that does that or has that kind of
yeah.
that individual. So I've answered my own question there, so forgive me.
No,
Back
no,
to
and I think, sorry, and just to add to that, and I think that that's the space that you kind of want to go into now in environments where you and I have worked in law, in finance, in real estate somewhat as well, who are very traditional
Mhm.
industries. It's less likely to happen. Yes, unfortunately, that happened in the law firm, but that was a mistake. I don't think it was on purpose. Um, but it's happened, and it shows that we're multidimensional. And as a result, and I do find that if we're not looking at that as we are human beings, and that's what the pandemic brought out, is that we are human beings, we have lives, and oh my gosh, yes, we have children and we have dogs and we have pets and all those sorts of things. And it was almost acceptable, whereas before you'd be mortified if anyone sort of saw that as a result.
No, indeed. Just to be clear, the post from the lawyer in question, he posted it. It was intentional. Shorts on,
Oh,
shorts on while doing
oh
doing the
dear.
live thing. And I said it got lots of engagement. So
Mm,
should every employee be engaged in employee advocacy?
no. Um, I don't think it should be forced. Because you're not, the adoption rate's not going to be high. You They're going to find it a chore. It has to be something that they want to do.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, not every employee needs to have that phase. But I say that I know a university whose dinner ladies get more traction than anything else. So why not? Um, and I kind of look at it in a quite a simplistic form of view, and lots of the ways that I do look at it is quite simplistic in that way, is that it's applying the common sense to it. If your employees don't want to do it, don't force them to do it. If they do want to do it, then understand what their rationale is behind, and if you don't see the rationale, get them to explain the rationale. Why do they want to do it?
So that's why I really enjoy these conversations. That's potentially a really interesting angle to take, is almost when launching an employee advocacy program, if you will. For those listening, I just did the inverted commas around that, is that, and maybe this is the approach that people are taking. I've just been out of it for too long, but you ask people to volunteer. It's like, we're doing this. If you want to be part of it, great. If you don't, and start with start with those that are willing volunteers. And again, back to a law firm, I think one of their finance team is an influencer on Instagram because he's got triplets, and so shares his story about triplets, and then he's used that to then this is how I do it, this is what it's this is what it means. To the point I understand he's actually got an agency managing his, he's a proper influencer on Insta, telling his story around having triplets. But I always feel that yes, not every employee should be on social. However, let's say you sell a finance related product, you should at least encourage your finance team to push this into their networks, because guess what, they're going to be connected to other finance team. Or if you push a marketing related product, then you should probably encourage I hope the marketing team are engaging anyway, but we do sometimes see, it is terrifying how many CMOs you look in professional services that aren't active on social, but that's for another story. But I really like that the concept of actually making it voluntary. And then I'm now thinking of the video of the leader dancing with the guy at the rave on the hill. He starts and someone else starts, and I think to your point, other people start to see it's safe, it's okay, we can do it, and it's not the world isn't going to end, and so on and so forth. Then takes me to, you mentioned earlier around the conference you were at last week of B2B influencers, and the concept has been around for a while, but I don't think I've ever seen any B2B brand, certainly in my space, kind of go down that route of having an influencer per se kind of push what they do. I can't, and maybe as I'm blinking to professional services, but I can't see it in B2B pro serves. But I'm happy to be challenged or otherwise based on what you heard at the conference last week, which I wasn't at.
Well, she had some great stats to support it, and I applauded her for it. And I thought if I was sort of going into that space, I would definitely explore B2B influencers, but they have to be the right partnership. And I think you interviewed someone, I think from Partner Tap. Is it Partner Tap? Yeah. And where they were talking about that ecosystem where you partner with other people. It doesn't have to necessarily always be with brands or other organizations. Why would you not apply that same concept to influencers?
Okay, so it's not, and that I can get on board with. Not that I'm not on board B2B influence. I think they can work in other industries, but it's more. I think it's just the word. The minute you say influencer, your brain just goes to oh God, what of them?
I know. I'm there.
Because what I've started to see in the last couple of years in B2B SaaS is an employee is just one of these brilliantly naturally gifted people that clever, witty, knows how to create sharp content, can get on trends, and they've moved into these kind of community manager roles. So Alex Sue is the one that always springs to mind from Ironclad, which is a legal contract lifecycle management piece of software. You've got Tom Boston, who was he's a former radio DJ in the UK, and became a sales rep for SalesLoft, but created amazing video content, and now has moved into marketing, that community role. Another chap called Will Aiken, who's based in Canada, was with SalesSpeed, just joined Lavender, who is an AI-powered email sales marketing tool, and they've all been employed to be the voice and the brand, almost like EA on steroids, but they are the one person that then the rest of the organization gravitates around and repurposes and reuses their content to create that, because the content is so clever, is so funny and engaging. should more traditional organizations, again, leading question, forgive me, consider, or how might more traditional organizations start to consider maybe taking that internal influencer approach, but actually deploy them and empower them to do the sort of things that the Alexes, the Wills, and Toms of the world are doing in the software space.
And I think and it's a good point, because I think a lot of companies will have that person or people who have that and specialize in their own field. You talked about sheds earlier. We have an influencer in sheds.
Okay.
He's the go-to person. He works in research, and he's really, really fantastic at what he pushed out there. But what it did allow, and what the EA tools do allow you to do, is to draw those people out. And what you're finding is that they are then, all they're using the tool for at that point is to find that content and then put their own spin on it. So, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And you can put guardrails in place, by the way. But going back to your point in terms of influencers, I definitely think there's a space for it. Why would there not be? In terms of when I'm thinking of an ecosystem, I'm thinking your employees, your influencer, your external influencers, your brand partnerships, your stakeholders, whoever they may be, bringing them together to get everyone sort of working together to make an impact for your organization. I feel like that's a huge lost opportunity anyway, if it's not being utilized.
I agree with you. I challenge a lot of my clients around, we go outside of LinkedIn, like TikTok or Instagram, this and that, especially around video. I say to them, especially the large ones, I guarantee you've got employees in this firm who've got TikTok channels or amazing creatives. They do it in their spare time. They create stuff. Go and find them and start to leverage that skill and expertise, irrespective of whether they sit in finance, IT, they're the dinner lady, they're the pilot. It doesn't matter. If they've got the skill set and they're passionate about it, why do you not want to nurture and use that in your own internal your own internal kind of ecosystem? So,
and I guess it comes, but sorry, but it continues to draw out those personalities, and those personalities, I do feel like they need some airtime as a result.
Agreed. Violently on the same page as you on that one. I always like to give my listeners, it's from a post I read a number of years ago around too many podcasts are just rambling podcasts. This is, of course, not rambling podcast. My listeners will hopefully attest to that. But I do like to help people with some kind of actionable kind of insight or some top tips. So if any listeners are thinking about revamping or restarting or starting kind of an employee advocacy program, what would be kind of your go-to things to consider or do?
Yeah, so and that's a very good question, because I think you need to choose the right tool. So if I go about my method of how I did this and how I accomplished it at Savills, I used this as an effective way to sort of achieve a multitude of company goals. So I defined what my company goals were first, and then I went out to see if the tools supported those objectives. And there's lots of tools out there that do it well, and there's some that do it really badly. And so we chose Disseminate because I felt like they really did understand the market and the challenges that the business faced. The second thing we did was we went to those people who were active on social media, because Savills were not necessarily, they're very traditional. They're not it's not a brand that is going to be going out there to share content. Now you can't stop them sharing content, but that's the space that we're in now. But we position them we position these 100 people to trial it. We found those advocates and we got them to activate it, to see, because then at that point, it's not a cultural change. They already understand how to go about and what the benefits of sharing content brings. They just needed to adopt the tool. We then managed to get feedback, and we closely monitored the tool and the results, but measure everything. And I would tell everyone to measure every single metric that you can get your hands on. And once we did roll it out, I noticed that the numbers, so when we scaled it beyond that 100 people, I did notice that the numbers started to dip. So what I did start to look at is what training is required. And what I found was that it wasn't necessarily the adoption of the tool. The tool has to be as easy for a 5-year-old to adopt. It's the adoption of LinkedIn. It's getting them to understand how is LinkedIn going to help you, and how is LinkedIn then going to be able to help you achieve your goals? Are you well connected? Are your profiles in the best possible, presenting you in the best possible light? And are you then sharing the right content? Because when you and I both know, when you share content, people come back and look at your profile. So you have to represent yourself. But you also have to be you have to be highly networked, because otherwise you're just sharing to your echo chamber as a result. So it becomes an echo chamber. So that's how we kind of went about it. And that I found, even though it was a slower process, and Disseminate were saying to me, look, you know, you can accelerate it, but we found that going slowly, getting that adoption, getting people to understanding, spending time with small groups was much more effective than doing it at scale, because you're not necessarily, they don't feel like you're talking to them at that point. And that's how we achieved the success that we did, and on the platform, and we grew hugely, and I think we managed to achieve a lot of success, and also we drove a lot of website traffic back to our content. So that meant that people were reading it. So we would measure. So what we were measuring was we looked at how well the platforms were adopted. So we have to look at that. We looked at how active those members were. And it was almost going back to them when they weren't that active, how much website traffic it was generating. And can the tool tell you how much money it's saving you? I thought that was the most powerful tool. So I used to go to the CEO and our senior leadership teams to say, did you know that we saved you £500,000? And they were like,
is that ad spend, pay per click? I'm guessing that time.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, I've got their attention. And so they're more likely to invest in what I'm trying to do. And then the other thing was just reporting on how much content is being shared. And I also think it's a very good gauge of what content is working. If your employee is not prepared to share that content, there's a reason why that content is not performing and it's not great. And it brings it full circle. So because we're talking about content, if the content isn't good, it just won't get shared. It won't generate the clicks either.
It's a good point. That I never thought about that. If an employee is not willing to share their own corporate content, there's something wrong with the content. If they're not willing to share it, why the hell would anybody else want to?
Exactly.
Engage with it?
So it gives you that yardstick to measure everything, and in order for that way, we were able to see the visibility. But engagement and visibility are sort of vanity metrics, and it's more for the employee to say, oh, well, I got 10,000 views on my post, but it was more sort of for us to see how effective the tool was and how effective the program was.
Yeah, awesome. Well, what a way to end today's podcast. Thank you so much, Ketna. So now you're out in the wild. Where can people find you if they want your help, your guidance, your expertise in all of this?
Thank you. LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me for now, and I'm building out websites, etc. So you'll see more and hear more.
I'll put the links in the wherever it is. I'm pointing at the bottom. I think I'm getting this right. Smash that subscribe button, all that kind of fun stuff. No, because I'm not going down that route. The links will be in the chat, and please do reach out to Ketna if you think she can help. Even if it's just a conversation, vast wealth of knowledge and insight and experience. As always, my listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you want to be on the podcast, if you want to recommend anybody to be on the podcast. But for now, Ketna, thank you. I really appreciate your time. And wherever you are in the world, the robots are coming. Until next time.
Thank you, Alex.